Like most people these days, I'm on social media and it was on there that someone described this week's movie as a feminist horror classic, which instantly piqued my interest as I had never even heard of it, or so I thought. So I tracked it down and acquired a copy, so let's take a look back at Jennifer's Body, which is an American horror comedy released in 2009, directed by Karyn Kusama and written by Diablo Cody, wherein our eponymous character Jennifer, played by Megan Fox, is kidnapped and sacrificed to Satan by a douche indie band, Low Shoulder. But the sacrifice goes wrong and Jennifer returns as a flesh-eating succubus. Her best friend Needy, played by Amanda Seyfried, tries to stop her murderous rampage. I want to try and answer two questions this week. Why did this film fail on release, and why has it grown a cult following in subsequent years? The first of those two questions is fairly easy to answer and has two parts really. The movie grossed a disappointing $31.6 million on a budget of $16 million and received mixed to negative reviews with a 45% weighted average on Rotten Tomatoes. The critical consensus largely being that this horror comedy is neither funny or scary. Those being incredibly valid criticisms of this film in my opinion, because when you are someone like me who has seen around 200 movies in the past 8 months, movies often have to be awful or brilliant for them to be memorable enough to stick in my mind. I often turn movies on thinking I've never seen them, only to get a few scenes in and remember, oh yeah, I remember this. With Jennifer's Body, I kept getting mild deja vu, like this rings a bell. It wasn't until I was a good 80% of the way through the film that I remembered I've seen this at least 2 times before, and this is the 3rd time I have actually seen it. It has some fairly clever and witty dialogue, but this is far too rare and falls kind of flat most of the time. Add to that, this isn't in any way, shape or form scary, with Jennifer eviscerating people off screen or in shadow, such as when she eats Colin's innards. This is the very definition of a 3 out of 5 star film for me. It's not offensively bad, nor does it have anything mind-blowingly memorable. I enjoyed my time watching it just fine, but I'm sure in another few years' time, if you ask me, have I seen Jennifer's Body, I will deny all knowledge of this movie's existence. Which brings us to why this film failed at the box office. As Cody Diablo herself has said in interviews, the studio decided to market this to boys who like Megan Fox. That's who's going to see it, and I was like, no, this is a movie for girls too. That audience they did not attempt to reach. I agree in part here that the reason the film failed was because it was marketed to 15-year-old boys and it had an R rating. So they couldn't even go out and watch the film at the cinema. The crazy thing is, it was rated R for language, not violence or sexual content, so they could have literally taken a few swears out and this would have been a PG-13. Here's the thing, if I was a studio executive, I'd have done exactly the same, as this is actually the kind of film I'd have loved as a 15-year-old boy. It has some lines that at that age I would have quoted endlessly at my friends. There is enough gore here to have kept me entertained at that age. And finally the big one, Megan Fox and Amanda Seyfried are extremely attractive ladies and they snog. Which as a 15-year-old, yeah, not gonna lie, would have been so hot. All of the above are very easy to put in a 2-minute trailer and market them to boys. The feminism within the film is not really so easily marketed, so let's take a look at why I think this has actually been lately seen as a feminist horror cult classic. The beautiful thing about art is it can be many things to many different people, and so a movie can be both a fairly forgettable, unfunny, unscary horror comedy for one person, and a feminist masterpiece for someone else due to differing emotional responses and resonance. I can see several ways you could view this in a feminist slant. Chief amongst them is this was written and directed by women and has 2 women as its stars, which is still more than a decade later incredibly rare within major Hollywood releases, and the writer herself has stated she wrote it to appeal more to girls than she did boys. The other most notable and probably only real narratively significant subtext that actually exists within the film is the film's depiction of a realistically intense, complex, and often toxic teenage female friendship. As the opening of the film says, Hel is a teenage girl. I imagine lots of girls have had relationships such as the one depicted between Needy and Jennifer. I know I've witnessed it with my 5 sisters when we were that age. Which brings us to the gay/bisexual subtext that definitely exists between the two girls, with the very opening scene saying this:
"You're totally lesbi gay."
What? She's my best friend.
And Needy giving Jenny some very thirsty looks throughout, which culminates in Jennifer kissing Needy in her bedroom. I hate to say this, but I have to agree with Amanda Seyfried here, who said she felt uncomfortable about the kiss because it felt like it was just for promotional purposes. This is exactly how I felt about this whole subtext. The kiss actually comes out of nowhere, isn't really important, and if you just took it out, it wouldn't change the story very much. Is initiated by Jennifer and not Needy, and feels kind of exploitative and aimed at appealing to the 15-year-old boys the studio wanted to market this movie to. Another feminist angle you could take with this film is to see the sacrifice of Jennifer as a metaphor for rape, with her being driven out to the woods, manhandled and tied up by a group of men, then having foreign objects placed into her body, with her subsequently using her sexuality to lure men in and then eviscerating them being the ultimate revenge upon men for what they put her through. The last reason I can see this film as being reimagined as some sort of feminist classic of the horror genre is as a metaphor for the Me Too movement. As Constance Grady, writing in Vox, said about the film, a group of powerful men sacrificing a girl's body on the altar of their own professional advancement became uncomfortably familiar. So that's Jennifer's Body, which is either a modern feminist cult classic or what the critical reception and marketing described it as on release, a fairly unfunny, unscary horror comedy for 15-year-old boys who like Megan Fox. It really failed mainly due to it being given an R rating and marketed to people who couldn't even go and watch it. It's no Ginger Snaps, which is a genuine cult horror classic with feminist undertones and the focus of next week's Look Back At. So I guess, subscribe and all that jazz if you want to watch me ramble on about Ginger Snaps. That's a really good movie actually, so maybe you should.